Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Azam Khan. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Hong Kong political veterans give the thumbs up to Beijing's interpretation of the national security law. Hong Kong prepares to welcome 2023 with most COVID measures abandoned. And former Pope Benedict has died at the age of 95. Hong Kong's political heavyweights have come out in support of Beijing's interpretation of the national security law. The clarification gives Chief Executive John Lee the power to decide whether a foreign lawyer can take part in a national security trial. But a basic law expert says more interpretations may be needed if the courts and the government disagree in the future. Joanna Ho reports.
The National People's Congress clarified Article 47 of the National Security Law, saying Hong Kong courts should obtain a certificate from the chief executive to certify whether a case involves national security and state secrets. Elaborating further today, political veteran Tam Yu Chung said the interpretation addresses the issue of admitting a foreign lawyer, as well as all questions that a court would encounter in national security cases. Hong Kong's sole deputy to the country's top legislature said the interpretation clearly explained the spirit, objectives, procedures, and mechanism of the law, and John Lee will be the final decision maker as the city's #1 and the chairman of the Committee for Safeguarding National Security. The clarification of Article 14 states that the committee also has the power to make judgments and decisions on whether national security is involved in a trial.
其實咧就係賦權行政長官係強化咗我哋嘅高度自治。
Executive Council convener Regina Yip said the rule does not expand the committee's power, but instead reinforces Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy. She added that there wouldn't be a clear-cut ban on admitting foreign lawyers, as the government also hires overseas practitioners for its cases. However, Basic Law Committee member Albert Chan said this would depend on how the government amends the Legal Practitioners Ordinance. He raised the possibility of seeking interpretations again should conflicts arise between courts and the government. Law Society President Chen Chek-ming said the interpretation clarified the legislative intent of the law. Beijing's interpretation was sought after Hong Kong courts allowed British barrister Tim Owen to defend media mogul Jimmy Lai in his forthcoming national security trial. Following the clarification, it remains unknown whether Owen will get the green light. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
Hong Kong's daily COVID caseload has reached its highest level since the middle of March. Of the 29,207 new infections today, 424 were imported. Another 52 patients died from the virus. A total of 11,594 COVID-positive deaths were recorded since December 31st last year, when the fifth wave began. Health Chief Lo Chung Mao says the government aims to align COVID vaccination requirements for inbound travelers from the mainland and overseas. Currently, visitors from the mainland do not need jabs, while those coming from overseas must be fully vaccinated.
We will be monitoring the situation and consider how we would adjust the vaccination requirement for these inbound passengers. We agree right now. In the past, we have a discrepancy in this requirement for inbound travelers coming from overseas as compared to the mainland. We will be adjusting this, and our principle is to align this to make sure that the requirement for both sides are the same.
Starting today, shoppers will have to pay double for a plastic bag. This comes after lawmakers passed a bill in October to raise the levy to $1. They also scrapped the exemption for frozen and chilled food. There will be no charge for certain goods, such as non-packaged food, but people can only get one free bag each time. However, additional bags can be provided if the first free bag cannot hold all items in the purchase. Retailers who ignore the measures will be given verbal warnings during a month-long grace period. Enforcement action will be taken directly against violators from January 31st. The city is preparing to say goodbye to 2022 and ring in the new year. Many Hong Kongers are welcoming 2023 with high hopes of a speedy return to normality as most COVID restrictions have been scrapped. Joanna Ho reports.
Looking back at the past year, many were frustrated with COVID and hoped for a speedy return to normal life.
上半年太多有疫情，跟住好多。
This man said he was troubled by the pandemic in the first half of this year. But luckily, many restrictions were eased in the second half, and he's looking forward to traveling overseas next year.
係都3年後先翻嚟，今次第一次。
This man said it is the first time in 3 years that he has returned to Hong Kong as he studies abroad and couldn't come back due to the earlier border restrictions. He hopes that the mask mandate would be scrapped and the city's economy could be restored as soon as possible. As night fell, people started to gather at the waterfront in Tsim Sha Tsui and party districts like Lang Kwai Fong. Hong Kongers can welcome 2023 at the Victoria Harbour Promenade, where the Tourism Board is hosting its annual New Year countdown celebration. There will be an enhanced edition of the 10-minute Symphony of Lights with pyrotechnic effects from prime buildings on Hong Kong Island. The event will be broadcast live on the Discover Hong Kong Facebook page. A giant clock will be on display at the Convention and Exhibition Center to count down the last 30 seconds of 2022. Police have closed dozens of roads in Central, Wan Chai and Kowloon to facilitate the celebrations. Members of the public are advised to use public transport and take heed of instructions of officers on site. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
13 men have been jailed for between 29 and 63 months for rioting in November 2019. They included Kok Tzu Lun, one of the 12 people caught in mainland waters while trying to flee to Taiwan 2 years ago. The defendants were among 213 people arrested in Yau Ma Tai during a clash between police and protesters in and around the Polytechnic University. Several demonstrations were staged near the university to distract police so that those trapped inside could escape. Deputy District Judge Veronica Hung said although there was no evidence that the defendants played a leading role, their presence showed that they supported the rioters. Overseas, former Pope Benedict has died at his Vatican residence at the age of 95. The German cleric was elected head of the Catholic Church in 2005. He served for less than 8 years before ill health prompted him to resign, becoming the first pontiff to do so in over 6 centuries. Benedict was regarded as a hardline conservative. During his tenure, the Church faced a barrage of criticisms over its handling of child abuse by priests. He spent his final years at a monastery in the Vatican and was often visited by his successor, Pope Francis. Former US President Donald Trump has criticized the Supreme Court and his Democratic opponents for releasing his tax returns. The thousands of pages show that he paid only $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017, and not a single cent in 2020, when he unsuccessfully sought a second term.
What we've noticed and what these tax returns really confirm are some of the ways that Donald Trump was able to avoid paying a lot of tax. There's been reporting, there's been previous testimony about how Donald Trump reported losses in many years on his taxes, partly because of carry-through losses from some of these companies that he owns. $10, $20 million losses on some properties, reported losses anyway. And these are techniques that Trump has used and Trump has bragged about in some respects, that he uses losses on properties to offset his taxes. And we see that reflected here.
Unlike his predecessors, Trump had persistently refused for years to disclose his tax returns. He took his fight all the way to the Supreme Court, which earlier this month rejected his bid to keep the documents secret. Trump is making another bid for the White House in 2024, but the shocking revelations could undermine his campaign. Veteran news presenter and TV interviewer Barbara Walters has died in New York at the age of 93. During a 50-year career, the American interviewed a long list of leaders from around the world. She once said she was not afraid of asking tough questions. In 1976, Walters became the first woman anchor on the evening news show in the United States. She went on to win 12 Emmy Awards. Her publicist said Walters died peacefully at home, surrounded by her loved ones. Thousands of New Yorkers are preparing to flock to Times Square to watch the New Year ball descending at the stroke of midnight.
It's only here in New York City that you see this Times Square Waterford Crystal Ball and all those people kissing and celebrating, filled with love for 2023. It is a beautiful image in New York City. We're back. Well, it's always warm here in Times Square. You can feel the warmth, but it's going to be a little wet, we think. But that's just another special effect. The ball will sparkle, and we're all going to join together and have a great time.
Ahead of the big moment, entertainment figures practice raising the 6-ton ball, which will be lowered to usher in the new year. When the clock strikes 12, confetti will also rain down on the revelers. Last year, COVID limited the number of people who attended the annual ritual. But this year, organizers are expecting a full house. Onto the weather now. Mainly cloudy with a patch of light rain in the morning of New Year's Day, but sunny in the afternoon. Temperatures will range between 14 and 18 degrees, becoming warmer in the following days. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for New Year's Eve. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Azam Khan, and from all of us in the HKIBC newsroom, Happy New Year.